Hello everyone, today is day 11 of our 30 days of watercolor flowers and we are painting anemones. Anemones come in all different colors, but we are painting white anemones today, and so we are going to be starting with the very black centers that they have. The centers are not only black, they're also very large and definitely the focal point of the flower. They have these really long filaments coming off the center. There's so many of them and they're packed really tightly. And at the end, they have these little balls, which are called anthers, that are also black and also very tightly packed together. And then we are going to paint the petals around the center while the centers are still wet. And I'm going to show you how we do that so that we can create these white flower petals without actually painting with white. And then for the greenery, there is a lot of really scraggly, rough leaves that are coming off near the base of where the flower and the stem meet. And then it's a pretty normal straight stem with more of those scraggly, rough leaves coming off the stem as well. We're going to do one anemone that's facing fully forward and one that you're kind of seeing from the side. So we're going to do the center as like a half circle with the filament and the anther coming around on only that circular half, and then a half circle petal for the petal that's kind of hiding the center, and then normal petals coming around after that. From my research, anemones can have a large number of petals to a small number. So we're not going to worry about the number of petals. Do whatever fits around your center when you're painting it. But I do like to think of them as kind of soft, rounded square shapes. All right, so to start, we are going to pick up some black. Now we're going to paint the centers first with this white anemone because we're going to use the paint from the center to paint the petals. So you'll see what I mean in a minute. But I'm going to paint a large circle for the center. I did leave a little bit of white space for kind of a highlighted area. And then with really light pressure and the tip of my brush, I'm making very quick, short strokes to represent the filaments that are coming off this center. There is a lot and they're bunched together, so I wouldn't make them very uniform. You want them to kind of overlap and look like it's a little bit chaotic. Now we're going to pick up some more of that same black, and with the same light pressure, we are going to make quick dotting strokes at the ends of the filaments. So these are the anther. You want some to be big, some to be smaller, and again, you want that chaotic feel where some are overlapping and some you can see distinctly, but you just want to make sure there's a lot. Okay, that looks perfect. Now, while it's still wet, you're going to clean your brush very well. And now we are going to paint the flower petals just using water and the color from our center. So I'm using clean water to make these rounded square shaped petals. And I'm making sure that my brush, when it comes down to the center, is touching into those black dots that we painted. So some of the color is able to come up into the petal to create the color in the petal very lightly, because white really isn't white. It reflects the colors around it. So it would make sense that when you're painting a white flower that it would have gray or blue or other colors in it. It's not going to be like white watercolor. So this is how we paint white watercolor on white paper, is we use other colors to give the illusion of a white flower. And you can see my brush leaves a lot to pick up more water. I'm using the water to create the petal shapes, and then I'm letting the color from the center come up into that shape to create the dimension and the color and the illusion of the white watercolor flower. A personal choice that I always make is I choose a color to kind of peek into the anemone to give it more interest and depth. So I chose a pinky purple that I already had on my palette, and I'm just very lightly going in and tapping that a little bit into the petals. I'm also tapping in some watered down black so it looks really gray, just to add some distinction between the petals so they look a little bit more separate. We're picking up heavy black again because now we're going to do the anemone that is on the top. So we're going to do that big black half circle and then the filaments coming off of it with the dots for the anthers only on the curved part of the little half circle. Then I'm cleaning my brush really good, and I am using a very watery brush to pull that color in as I am making my petals. I like to leave a little bit of white space between the petals so that you can kind of tell the distinction between each one. I don't want them to totally take over the dots of anther either. I want them to just touch down onto those dots so that they bring up the color. And you can see how there's a distinction between the flower petals, but I'm not afraid of letting them touch each other and kind of blend together a little bit. So I started with the petals in the back, and now we're going to do these petals in the front that are covering some of our center. So I let it touch down a little bit to the center to take in some of that color, but I want them to be a little bit more flat and not as full, so it gives the illusion that we're looking at them more from the side and that they're covering up some of what we're seeing in the center. And then I put some of that light pinky purple color into the flower while it's all still wet, as well as some more of the gray, light black color that we've been working with, just to give a little bit more depth and distinction between all those lovely petals. Make sure your brush is really clean, and we are going to pick up some sap green and start making the color for our greenery. So I'm using sap green with a little bit of red to get a moody green, because red and green are complementary colors, so they help cancel each other out. And I am starting with the scraggly greenery that is peeking out from right at the base where the flower and the stem of the anemone meet. So I let it touch the flower while it was still wet a little bit to create that bleed. That also really helps to create distinction when you're painting white flowers, to paint the greenery right around the base and to let it bleed just a little bit. It just adds a lot more color to something that can be really flat and colorless. Then I'm taking the stem straight down, and then because it feels more heavy on the left side, I'm going to add a little bit more greenery coming out the right, and then I'm going to do the main leaf coming off the stem really heavy on the right side, so you can see how it gives a really nice balance. And then we're going to curve it down a little bit, because curving your leaves and your branches gives you a lot of movement to your piece. And then we're going to the top to do the same thing. So I'm starting with bringing the stem all the way down. And thankfully, both of our flowers are still wet enough that we get a nice little bleed when we are doing those scraggly pieces up near the flower. I'm using the tip of my brush and kind of dabbing the paper with my paint to create these chaotic strokes for the scraggly leaves. It's a little bit triangular shaped, so thicker and wider towards the flower, and then more pointy and thin as we come out. And then I'm doing some leaves on the stem as well, heavier on the right side, but I felt like it needed a little bit on the left side to feel balanced as well. Now I've picked up some more sap green in a heavier concentration to add some shadows and details, a little bit of darkness here and there to give it some more dimension. Also notice that within the leaves, I haven't connected every piece. Some pieces feel like they're hanging out a little bit. There's lots of white space or disconnection. I really like how that looks. It makes it feel really loose and organic. Now I'm mixing another green that is using sap green, some blue, some red to get a really nice dark shadow color to go in and add more contrast for depth and shadows. When I'm choosing how to place this shadow color, I'm just making sure to use very light pressure with the tip of my brush and remembering that less is more, and I'm focusing on the base of stems and the base of flowers and just very lightly around the ends. And with those details, our anemones are finished. Now the only thing left to do is to add it to the day 11 spot on our watercolor flower guide, but this was a really fun one to add to the flower guide. It's fun to add a white flower since it's so full of color. Thank you so much for being here today while we painted day 11, the anemone. I will see you all tomorrow for day 12. Bye.